Hey, this is a podcast from Occupy Radio on Student Radio in Bergen. Please feel free to leave your feedback and comments on our Facebook page, Occupy Radio Norway.
This is Occupy Radio with Anthony and Mr. Paulie.
Hello, world, and what a wonderful world it is, although there are some things that are compromising this wonder, and we want to get to the bottom of this and try to do our best to right some of those wrongs by exposing them and providing some alternatives to the system. But who are we, I hear you ask out there in listener land? Well, we are a few guys sitting in the relative comfort of the studios of Student Radio in Bergen, in the city of Bergen, Norway, and the show is called Occupy Radio, with myself, Mr. Paulie, and the zealous, zestful, zingy, zippy Anthony Hill.
G'day.
And the sassy, savvy, sharp and shrewd Rune Storgvat.
Hello.
Hello, sir. And Anthony.
Yes?
I know that you usually begin with a quote.
Well, I do, yeah.
But I thought I would jump in.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to jump in the queue, and I'm going to chime in with one of my own. And it's from, it's by a former US president, which is rather relevant in this week of, it's the second Tuesday in November.
Which president?
This one's going to be Ronald Reagan, saying that democracy is something to die for. He said, "Democracy is worth dying for because it's the most deeply honourable form of government ever devised by man." Do you have anything to add to that?
I do, actually. Well, I didn't mind that little quote myself, just personally. But I have one that actually is a clip I brought along again. I had a clip last week, and I thought I'd try and top that clip with a new clip from one of my favourite people. It said that this guy is the most cited or quoted living person. He's 83 years old. He's a professor at MIT. He's a linguist, philosopher, cognitive scientist, historian, political critic, and activist. And just in case anybody had any doubts as to his credentials,
he knows what he's doing.
He does, yeah. And I urge listeners to search him on the internet or on YouTube. His name is Mr. Noam Chomsky, and this is what he had to say about democracy in the USA.
The United States is not a democracy. It's what's called in the technical literature a polyarchy. That's the term invented by the leading democratic theorist, Yale professor Robert Dahl. A polyarchy is a system in which power resides in the hands of those who Madison called the wealth of the nation, the responsible class of men, and the rest of the population is allowed to participate. Every couple of years they're allowed to come and say, yes, thank you, why don't you continue for another 4 years.
So that was Noam Chomsky, and what do you think about that, Mr. Paulie?
Well, it blows Ronald Reagan's quote far away, because, of course, there is a lot of pro-democracy, let's say, vitriol in the United States, and blaming other countries for not being democratic.
Yeah, well, there's the big election going on at the moment, isn't it? It's going to be interesting to see what comes of that. But democracy is meant to be all about power to the people, isn't it, Mr. Paulie?
It is indeed. And you're listening to Student Radio, and we are Occupy Radio, and we might as well have a song called exactly that, Anthony. Power to the People by the Black Eyed Peas.
Power to the people. Power to the people, right on.
You're listening to Occupy Radio there. You're on Student Radio in Bergen, and you're with Anthony, Mr. Paulie, and Rune as well. And that was Power to the People by the Black Eyed Peas. And that was a cover from the John Lennon song, Mr. Paulie. Now, I'm going to test your memory here. Which year did he put that out?
Well, I don't really remember because it was 1971, but I remember. I've done my research.
Because you're only about 10 or 11 years old then, weren't you?
Yeah, I was actually considering retirement around then.
Yeah, so John Lennon's song, Power to the People, and that's what this show is all about, democracy.
And now it's time for Who Would Have Thunk It?
Where Anthony usually, what does he do? He brings in a lot of unthunkable news headlines.
That is right, Mr. Paulie,
And
because I'm constantly reading through the crap that is written in newspapers every single day.
I know Anthony quite well, people, and that's true.
Yes.
He does that. He's constantly online,
wading through crap.
He does.
And so I come up with quite a lot of unthinkable headlines. And one of the ones I saw this week was, are you ready for this one, Mr. Paulie? Runa really reacted to this one. If your security pass doesn't work, it means you've lost your job. That's absolutely true.
Is this a way to tell employees that they're no longer welcome? Their services are no longer required?
Yeah, they're being culled, as they say.
Okay, so you turn up to work and you go,
looks like I've lost my job.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so it's a Swiss bank culling 10,000 workers. Mr. Paulie, imagine getting a message from your employer via email that if your security card doesn't work tomorrow, it means you've lost your job. Some staff turned up to work to find their employee cards no longer worked at the turnstile and then were escorted to human resources, according to various sources with knowledge of this situation. Once they were at Human Resources, they received their personal items in a bag with a letter saying that they would have 2 weeks paid leave, after which they were to return to pick up their redundancy package. Some personnel joked that, because the name of the bank is UBS, that UBS now stands for You've Been Sacked. So employer-employee relationships getting more and more impersonal, aren't they?
UBS. Utter bullshit.
Oh, that's an even better one.
Yeah. Wow, what happened to the good old letter? Or even
just call you into
the office, excuse me, unfortunately. Or have a big meeting and say, well, these people have unfortunately been made redundant.
It is exactly what Runa said. It's like we're being treated, or people are being treated like machines, just being turned off. It's like being switched off.
Yeah,
really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's a view that is spreading around the world that this is the way to treat people, and I can't for the
life of me
understand why they would think that this is a good thing, how this is actually contributing to a better society. Is it more effective or?
But imagine the people themselves. I mean, 10,000 people out there just suddenly bang without a job, not being told why, maybe wondering if they've done something wrong, their self-esteem. They don't think of any of those kind of things.
No, it goes completely out the window.
So they've been virtually sacked in a way.
Virtually sacked, yes.
Literally virtually sacked.
Yeah. Anyway, I have actually a good headline, one which I think is good. You guys can make up your own minds.
Is it bordering on thunkable even?
Yeah, it's unthinkably good.
Good.
Yeah. The US Supreme Court upholds a $19 billion judgment against Chevron. Because I don't know if you guys have heard about this. Has been going on since the 90s. In Ecuador, the Ecuadorian thing. But I'll read out what I've got here anyway. The U.S. Supreme Court has declined to block a judgment from an Ecuadorian court that an American oil firm paid billions in damages for pollution in the Amazon. Chevron was fighting a ruling that it must pay $18.2 billion in damages. This sum increased to $19.2 billion because they didn't apologise. Because the court ruled in Ecuador that you'll get an extra billion if you don't apologise, and they didn't apologise, so there's an extra billion on there.
Well, sorry is a hard word, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's a billion-dollar word.
Yeah. Anyway, it's the latest move in a decades-long legal wrangle between Texaco, who were bought out by Chevron in 2001, and the people of the Lago Agrio region of Ecuador. The case claimed that Texaco contaminated land between 1964 and 1992 and has triggered several other lawsuits in the courts within the US and elsewhere. And I've actually seen this. I've seen a film about it as well, and the amount of it's disgusting. It makes you sick. What has been left behind by the oil company there.
And the figure here that really gets me is the fact that it's 19 billion. They're paying out 19 billion. What amount is that in terms of what they already have? I mean, is it a big fine?
Yeah, exactly. It's probably not. It's probably not at all. And would it cover all of the damage that they've done?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. What was the real cost of the oil?
People have died from this, been made sick, and their livelihoods destroyed, and blah blah blah. Anyway, we'll go on to the next one.
You said something about the world's largest telephone bill.
Yeah, this was a funny one.
I thought I had that the other day as well, but okay.
Did you? Oh, you thought you did.
Yeah.
No. This is your telephone bill, Mr. Paulie, is nothing compared to this. A woman in southwest France received a telephone bill of nearly 12. Now wait for it. quadrillion euros. Now you've got million, then you've got billion, and then you've got trillion, and then you've got quadrillion. Now the GDP of the USA, the world's biggest economy, is something like 30 trillion, isn't it, Runa? Somewhere in the order of...
I'm not sure. You
Anyway.
have me at the loss there.
Yeah, it's something. So we're talking something which is about 100 times as big as the GDP. A woman received a telephone bill 100 times as big as the GDP of the USA. After the company admitted its mistake, they waived the amount owed. But hang on a minute. The phone company, they're called Bourgeois Telecom, initially told her that there was nothing they could do to amend the computer-generated statement, and they offered to set up instalments to pay off.
You can pay this over 4,000 years.
Sometimes human stupidity is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
How long do you think it would take to pay off 12 quadrillion euros, Runa?
Well, it depends. If you're sitting as the chairman of the Federal Reserve or maybe the European Central Bank, then you could just print it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
Well, good answer, Runa.
It's taken the US government a long time to pay a similar amount as well.
It has, yeah. Well, this is just a normal person. She's a teaching assistant. So, but I tried to work it out on my calculator. And my calculator, even though it's a very big one, it didn't have enough zeros on it. But I worked out it was going to take her somewhere around 6,000 years to pay that amount off.
My first reaction was, Mum, can you stop calling me from Australia? It's getting a bit expensive. Maybe it was the what do you call it? The customer number. Instead of the, you know how it's got lots of zeros?
What if they
In
thought
Norway,
of
they
that?
call it the KID number, and it's often, maybe 20 digits
They
long.
swapped it for the amount.
Mm.
Anyway, that's all we have for Who Would Have Thunk It today, Mr. Paulie. Have you got a song coming
I
up?
do. We've got some Stevie Wonder from... Yes.
I like Stevie.
Bit of funk here. You haven't done nothing. You're on Student Radio, srib.no, and this is Occupy Radio, the show. And previously on Occupy Radio, we've discussed the convergence of crises, haven't we, Anthony?
We sure have.
And we've been focusing specifically recently on war and climate change, economy. And last week we talked about the life trajectory, didn't we? But what do we have in store today?
Today it's about democracy, and it's quite timely having the big elections coming up in the USA, or happening as we speak, really, this week. And but Mr. Paulie, haven't you noticed that the word democracy, it's bandied around hither and thither by world leaders and the like?
Yeah. Even countries which are not democratic to it.
Yeah. And I actually studied ancient history at school, and I know we like to make fun of that, but I like to make fun of it myself. But one of the few times I was paying attention, I remember learning that that term has its roots in ancient Greece. The word democracy, meaning rule of the people, demo meaning being the Greek for people, and kratos meaning power. Today I searched it on Wikipedia, and I found the following definition on Wikipedia. Democracy is a form of government in which all eligible citizens have an equal say in the decisions that affect their lives. Democracy allows eligible citizens to participate equally, either directly or through elected representatives, in the proposed development and creation of laws. It encompasses social, economic and cultural conditions that enable the free and equal practice of political determination. And we all know that there's widespread criticism of democracy or the lack of it, but several times I get the feeling that words and ideas, they're just loosely slapped around, and like Noam Chomsky says, we don't actually live in a real democracy, maybe even here in Norway. But I'm sure we can get to the bottom of this show. In this show, sorry. What have you got to say, Runa?
Well, I think... I'm actually voting for the listeners to make up their own minds about if we're living in a real democracy or not.
So you're voting for that? You've been afforded the vote?
Yeah, I do. But I think that democracy as a concept in the mind of the common man is largely used in a very narrow sense. and one in which our voices are put into a ballot box, which proceeds to produce a governing party or a representative politician. Now, I'm very happy that humanity actually got to this stage, but I'm very displeased that it seems like we've been stuck here for more than 100 years.
Sorry, it's almost become a cliche too. Democracy. It's a word. It's a catchphrase which is bandied around, as you said.
Democracy.
It reminds me a bit of the peace fries at McDonald's. The Americans were all about peace. The French were not, because they did not support the Americans invading Iraq.
Yeah. There is a lot of pride and sort of moral high ground by using the word democracy.
It's always connected with freedom, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if I know you, Runa, which I think I do quite well now, I can smell a history lesson coming on. And I mentioned Greece earlier.
That's the only thing that you're smelling. Anyway, yes, I do have that. And where school usually traces our ideas of democracy from is, of course, the Greek. And the Greek city-states had internal democracies where any free, native and adult male could and should show up in the assembly and vote directly on each case or legislation. So you had other governing bodies like the courts or the council, but the assembly was usually the main seat of political power.
So, apart from the slaves, women, children and foreigners, everybody was expected to participate in the governing of the city.
So who's left over after that?
Is this a real democracy?
It's easy to criticize it from today's perspective, but this was a patriarchal society built on the idea that men should do the governing while the women should raise the children and slaves were just useful tools. And Athens, which is considered the main historical source of Greek democracy, had about 300,000 in total population, all counted for, of which up to 5,000 to 6,000 actually attended the assembly. So if we compare the number of people voting directly on political cases today, as for instance the Norwegian Parliament, Stortinget, has 169 seats, representing roughly 5 million people. So even if we add up all the local governance seats, the comparable attendance isn't even close.
Yeah, but the Greeks had their asses kicked by the Romans and later the Roman Empire fell apart. So why wasn't democracy kept alive in this way?
I'm supposing that answer to be for reasons of power, money, wars, lack of efficiency in a democratic structure. But if we look more closely at the Roman way of democracy, it is much more closer to our current political environment. The Romans linked democratic participation to its legislative assemblies, which coexisted with the Senate and the executive magistrates. So the reality of democracy in the Republic of Rome is a completely different question and should be of concern for us since we built on this model for our modern democracies.
Well, we are concerned, and have mercy on us, people. And we can have a listen to a bit of a song now. A bit of Marvin Gaye.
Oh, I love Marvin Gaye.
Merci, merci, moi. Anthony, this would be a good place to say that our listeners can always download our podcast.
Which can be found in two different places.
Two different places, yes.
Facebook,
and
it's called
Occupy Radio Norway.
And on YouTube, which is called
Occupy Radio Norway.
Very good.
And
Mr.
of course,
Polly,
you can stream this live on srib.no. That's student radios in Bergen, Norway.
At 12:30 every single Friday.
Indeed. So we've been talking about the history of democracy, especially in Greece and Rome, Anthony. And Runa, perhaps we could fast forward to modern times and the democracy of today. What is the predominant form of governance now?
Well, in general, It's built on the principles of separating powers of government as they did in the Roman Republic. And the most common is to separate into 3 different branches, which each has its scope of governance and responsibility. And the first is the legislative, which means it creates and revises laws. And the second is executive, which means it oversees the running of a country. And the third is a judiciary, which means it makes interpretation and rulings according to laws. So usually there's a link between the legislative and the executive, which puts the executive answerable to the legislative, while the judiciary is ideally completely separate and impartial to the 2 others.
So, before we abandon all reason and embrace academic careers in political science, why has this got anything to do with Occupy or anything else we've talked about in our show?
Well, thank you for that reset, Anthony. I'm not sure I would have been able to stop myself.
You're on a roll then, mate.
Yeah. The Occupy movement is built on the need for a change, and that change can't be stated in simple terms because our problems go much deeper. So this is what we've been talking about earlier. Now the point here is that the principle of separating powers of government does not help the disempowering and dispossession of the common people. The structure of the government does not help in any of the crises we mentioned so far. Actually, it exacerbates them while giving us false expectations of once we get the right people in office or maybe the right policies, then everything is going to be all right.
You're getting a bit down on democracy here. From a layman's perspective, I'm hearing that maybe we should just do away with democracy.
Yeah, you tend to forget that I'm supposed to be the cynic.
Yeah, of course.
Well, actually, I'm trying to say just the opposite of that we should just... we need to reinstate democracy in a truer form.
The way it was supposed to be.
Yeah. So the system of today isn't functioning as a democracy in between the ballot boxes. There weren't any referendums in any country, as far as I know, about the invasion of either Iraq or Afghanistan. There hasn't been any referendum on whether we should reset the financial system or create a new one. The sad thing is that neither politicians nor citizens even act as if it's a true democracy, because if they did, then there would have been referendums on these issues.
Yeah, totally agree. And I hear what you're saying. We should expect people to actually understand the financial systems, though, you know. It is a bit hard to understand, wouldn't you say, for the average person?
Well, people obviously don't have enough grasp of the political game to understand that what they hear in the election campaign is rarely what goes into their policies. And even if they do, they certainly don't grasp the consequences of such policies. And this logic might as well rephrase your question to, should we expect people to actually understand politics well enough to hold an election?
Yeah, I admit some elections seem a bit like a charade, but isn't it better to have someone who knows how to drive to actually be in the driver's seat?
Well, of course, if you're in a car, that makes perfect sense. However, the governing of a country is a completely different matter.
You're in a car with lots of kids and all that sort of stuff, or a football team.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you're in a car.
Yeah.
Political processes involve huge numbers of people. The politicians are just a very tiny number with limited time, limited knowledge, and oftentimes complete lack of emotional connectedness with the effects of their decisions.
Yeah, but still what you're saying is that people will be asked to make decisions on issues that involve a lot of information and complexity. So is it really possible?
Well, building democracy is a continual process that starts with what we are taught at school, how we organize our businesses, and so on. As it stands now, the representational democracy is barring people from actual participation on the highest levels. And that is a huge disincentive to commit any effort to acquire information and overcome those complexities. So if we aren't given the opportunity, why should we even care?
Yeah, well, the Occupy movement seemed to be doing just that, you know, giving people the opportunity to be heard. What I saw in autumn 2011 was thousands of people gathering together and discussing politics like they'd been starving for it for a bloody long time.
Anthony?
Yes?
I've got a solution.
Yep.
There's one person who we should go to now. The go-to guy.
And who would that be?
I think we should go up to Vegard.
I reckon we should too. Let's give him a call.
Hello.
Hello, Vegard. Where are you today?
I'm in my living room up here in Trondheim.
Nice. Is it cold?
On my couch. Yeah, I have a blanket around me, a good wooden woolly blanket, so no problem.
Watch out for your feet as well. You don't want to get those all cold and stuff.
Yeah, maybe I should get some ullabba.
Yeah, or some Ugg boots or something like that.
Paulie, what are you, his mum or something? Jesus, get on with it.
I care about this man. I want him to blow his trumpet. But what have you got for us today, Vegard?
Well, as Anthony said earlier on this show, Wikipedia defines democracy as a form of government in which all eligible citizens have an equal say in the decisions that affect their lives. But if you look at the state of affairs with this definition as a backdrop, how does it look for democracy in the world? First of all, most democracies today are representative democracies, meaning people don't have a direct say in cases that affect them. A politician representing thousands of other people as well actually do the voting that determine what becomes law and what does not. Every fourth year or so, all people have the chance to decide who's going to represent them in the next parliamentary term. If this was ever dynamic enough to keep up with the real world, it was back when letters were delivered on foot. The important decisions have probably never been taken inside the actual National Assembly halls. They have been taken in the offices and lobbies of Parliament, hence the term lobbying. Lobbying is of course not limited to politicians talking to each other. All people in theory can act as lobbyists through talking to politicians, writing letters, rallying campaigns, and so forth. But some people lobby full-time on a professional basis, paid by people not wanting or knowing how to do their own lobbying. According to an organization called Center for Responsive Politics, there are 12,000 registered lobbyists in the U.S. And if you think a lot of money is spent on the presidential election campaigns, as mentioned in an earlier show, the campaigns for the 2012 election will cost around $6 billion. The amount spent on lobbyism was more than $3 billion in 2011 alone. And where does the money come from? There are, of course, lots of different organizations, but according to a ranking of the top lobbying organizations for 2012, again from the Center for Responsive Politics, a lot of the money are coming from big business interests. It makes sense that those focusing primarily on profit have more money to spend on lobbying than non-profit organizations just trying to make the world a better place. From their lobbying power, corporations have a big say in the decisions affecting people's lives, but their interest is, of course, growing bigger and more profitable. Neoliberals claim this is in the interest of the people, but at this point there should be no doubt that the trickle-down theory is nonsense. More and more goes to the top, and as we talked about in the show on economics, the money system works in a way that requires corporations to keep growing if they want to stay in business. This is bad news if we want to attain sustainability, and lobbyism, even if a lot of people are lobbying for sustainable measures, is not helping. To use the Titanic analogy from our Convergence of Crisis show, businessmen on board who've bet a lot of money on Titanic setting a record time crossing the Atlantic will handsomely reward any servant or shipmate able to influence the captain in keeping up full speed ahead. Thankfully, there's a new development that is starting to change the playing field. An organization based on online campaigning for Democratic candidates, Act Blue, has come up as one of the major lobby organizations in terms of donations by asking ordinary people to chip in. Also, petition sites such as Avaz, Some of Us, and the petition site are starting to have a real influence, and that's from lots of people only lending their names to causes they care about. As a consequence of two of Some of Us's campaigns, both Dole and Adidas's Facebook pages have recently been flooded by messages from people objecting to their actions in human rights and workers' rights issues. So there's hope for democracy after all, but in the end, the most important thing is that people, and that means you out there listening to this, take things in your own hands and get involved.
Here,
And that's it.
Vergaard. Here.
You know, Vergaard,
Yeah.
we lobby you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that was the wrong answer. I love you too.
I lobby you. Yeah. Mate, that was fantastic. Absolutely, yes. You should be a politician.
Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe in the future when politics is something different than today.
Nice.
Or,
Well,
Yeah.
you keep warm up there in beautiful Trondheim,
yes.
and we look forward
I
to
will.
hearing from you next week, blowing your trumpet.
Yeah.
Bye, mate.
See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
So there was Vergaard saying, get up and stand up, and that's what we should do now, Anthony. We
I
should
think
listen
so.
to, well, you all know who this is. It's the great, late Bob Marley telling us to get up and stand up.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up.
There's Bob Marley, of course, telling us to stand up for our rights, or get up, stand up for our rights. And we just also, Vergaard told us to do similar things.
He did.
Yeah, from the luxury of his sofa. And before we heard from Vergaard, Anthony, you mentioned something about the Occupy movement, which seems to be taking us back to the real democracy, you know, a la the definition of democracy as opposed to the lobbying that's going on, the circus that's going on.
Giving democracy back to the people, or allowing, people to be involved. Wasn't it, Runa?
Yeah, but I think the good thing is that it's not just the Occupy movement that is moving toward proper forms of democracy. There are several examples of this happening around the world right now, and some are having a real impact beyond what we should expect from the status quo.
Do you mean that's going on in Iceland at the moment?
Yeah, sure, that's a very good example. They had a major downturn after their banks went down in 2008, and to deal with the loss incurred by the banks, the Icelandic taxpayers were being forced to accept a repayment guarantee to the British and Dutch governments. And the payback was being limited at 6% of national GDP per year, but it would have imposed a crushing austerity on the Icelandic population. However, a petition signed by nearly 25% of the electorate made the president of Iceland veto the bill and force it into a referendum. This has happened twice now, with a resounding no from the Icelandic people, and has since been taken to the European courts by the British and Dutch governments. Now, the Icelandic people didn't just stop there.
Yeah, didn't they arrest the Prime Minister or something like that as well?
Yes, they did, and they charged him with negligence. And to top it off, they started work to revise their constitution to safeguard against this ever happening again. And the exciting part is, of course, that the Constitutional Assembly consists of 25 elected non-party specific citizens, and that the ideas for the new constitution has been gathered through crowdsourcing.
That's quite a historic feat, as far as I reckon. Has there been any other leaders arrested or charged with negligence for economic malpractice?
Not as far as I know. Besides, there are indeed few laws or even constitutions that have explicit clauses that can actually place this responsibility on the leaders, because the leaders are supposedly accountable to its parliament or its electorate, which means that we have the ultimate responsibility.
Well, are you implying there that people are irresponsible?
What I'm saying is that there is a chain of responsibilities we as citizens of democratic countries have failed to fulfill. First, that we should have demanded transparency in all governmental issues. Second, that this transparency should be made in an intelligible form for the common citizens.
Yeah.
It's bizarre with the legalese is another language which nobody can understand.
Yeah, and you need to devote your life to examining these texts to understand. But thirdly, our leaders should have been made responsible in the event that they didn't act in our best interest, short term and long term. And fourth, but not least, we should demand that leaders are held accountable not just to their own citizens, but also citizens in other countries directly affected by their policies when it comes to environment or human rights.
Paulie, I wish we had a sound effect for applause like we used to have in our old show, because I'd like to applaud the people of Iceland.
We can do that now. And it's a beautiful country too, by
It
the
is,
way.
yeah. I have to go there. I haven't been there, but I know people who have, including you.
You must.
Yes. And so this hasn't really happened in the financial crisis of today, though, has it, Runa?
Well, you know what we could get? Conversely, we could get a whole, like a pantomime boos as well. So people could go, boo, instead of clapping.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
We don't need effects on this show. We can just do it ourselves. Ready? So this is for the financial crisis today. Nobody is taking credit for it. Boo.
Anyway, over to you, Runa.
Yeah, no, most certainly not. And this isn't just limited to financial matters. But let me take the financial first. There were several concerns regarding the growth of the financial sector and the interdependencies it had created. But the transparency regarding the policies and how they were implemented was not open for debate or intelligible for the common citizens. Our political leaders are well aware of this, so in cases where they think a public outcry will foil their plans, they will do their utmost to diminish the transparency in such a way that you can't say the information wasn't there, but for all practical purposes it's not available unless you wander certain political corridors.
But do you have any examples to back up such a claim?
Well, of course, the bailouts come to mind,
Mm-hmm.
but I think a better example would be the Patriot Act of October 2001, which was passed in a hurry without proper oversight or debate, and even ignoring certain objections. And another would be the acts known as SOPA and PIPA, which seeks to limit copyright violations by a wide array of tools for stopping internet traffic.
Yeah, because they stop them going through, but then they just keep coming up with new ones and giving them new names, don't they?
Yeah,
and
they
trying
do.
to push them through.
Yeah, and the context is, of course, that the entertainment business has a huge interest in getting these laws passed. And cleverly enough, they have connected this legislation to trade agreements that lack public transparency. So when it comes to SOPA and PIPA, they were both dropped after a massive public outcry. But what we know is that big business doesn't take a no for a no. They have, since the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was passed in 1998, made several attempts at passing bills that in one way or another infringe on the digital rights of the individual. Their latest attempt after SOPA and PIPA is called COICA.
COICA, Jesus.
Which is an acronym for Combating Online Infringement and Counterfeits Act.
Nixon was a Quaker, by the way. Oh, sorry.
He was? Oh.
Good one, Paulie. Good one. Yeah. We should come up with our own acronym for different things, I reckon.
Yeah.
Have an acronym competition. Yeah.
Well,
You out
anyway,
there, we can ask our listeners to throw in some acronyms, of course.
Okay, can I come back in, guys?
Sorry.
Oh,
thanks.
Runa, we always
thank
do this to you.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
But I do like it in a way. Anyway, the important part here is that public outcry comes at a cost, and it can't be sustained again and again, something which the industry knows very well. So why the political representatives can't be trusted to protect the public in such matters is a completely different story, but one we can't overlook.
Yeah, as Vegard mentioned, big business has millions and billions to throw at these kind of things, but you and I, who are members of different online NGOs and we can chuck in our $10 here and our $20 there, but sooner or later it runs out, doesn't it? And they know that.
Yeah, they do, and by changing different names and changing the text and so on, they force the political system to keep processing it,
which costs more money and more time, and
yeah, it does.
They
and
wear you, try and wear you down.
Eventually, they do win.
Yeah. Anyway, it seems that we focus on something from the USA in every single show. Runa, why is this? Why is it worse there than anywhere else?
We have indeed, but I think the U.S. represents the center of modern Western society, and because of its influence, it becomes the natural place to look for systemic flaws. And many of the policies that we have talked about are created through an international dynamic, but the U.S. is almost always included, and there is a marked tendency to have them implemented in the U.S. first. So what we see with the Patriot Act and legislation for digital rights are that they directly influence citizens who are not living in the U.S. In effect, that creates an extension of U.S. jurisdiction to any citizen of the world and undermines the efforts to create a supranational justice that can deal with transnational crime.
So how can this affect us directly? And by the way, what is the Patriot Act for the people out there? Because I've heard of it, but I'm not quite sure what it encompasses or how it can affect me.
Very simply, the Patriot Act was put into force after the terrorist attacks on 9/11, and it created the possibility to do a lot of different things to counter terrorism. And for instance, the Patriot Act made provisions on foreign intelligence so that surveillance could be conducted under less specific circumstances. So as long as it can be tied to counterintelligence or counter-terrorist purposes, it just needs a non-transparent court decision to go into effect.
So they can grab you for pretty much any reason they want.
Yeah, first
or spy on you, or listen in, or
actually that's another act, but it's an extension of the Patriot Act.
Okay.
So what we have seen in the post-invasion history is that the Patriot Act and its extension has, as you mentioned, allowed for kidnappings and detainment of foreign citizens without due process. So this is all about the Guantanamo Bay stories that we hear.
It smells of a kind of modern-day McCarthyism as well, I guess, the sort of witch hunt.
Yeah. So, but you know, the Guantanamo Bay is on some islands on Cuba. So, and Guantanamo isn't the only place because they have sort of facilitated this U.S. covert operations by establishing a network of hidden prisons. And those, most of those completely escape any kind of public transparency.
Scary stuff, Runa, and a little depressing, actually. Paulie, I think we need an uplifting song.
Yeah, let's go to the Chi-Lites from the 70s. Give more power to the people.
Another power to the people.
That's the Chi-Lites with Give More Power to the People. Great stuff. Reminds me a bit of Sly Stallone, you know, Family Stone.
Yeah, I love that. I did. I'm going to come up and borrow that CD if you don't mind, Mr. Paulie.
We'll see. As long as you behave yourself.
Now, Runa, you said earlier that Iceland was an example of making democratic change. Do you have any other examples?
Yeah, we mentioned that Iceland used crowdsourcing, and another Nordic country to do just that is Finland. They have, since the 1st of March 2012, implemented something which they call Citizens' Initiative Rule, which means that any eligible voter can propose a bill or suggest that work on a bill should be started. So he just needs to get the support of 50,000 signatures, and then the Finnish parliament is forced to consider the bill. But, however, they are not obliged to accept it, and they don't have to leave it unmodified. So this initiative has also been picked up by the European Union and was implemented from May 2012.
And do you see this as an actual game changer in the development of democracy?
No, far from it, because there isn't any obligation to include or compromise with the initiatives. So it may prove to be more like a ruse to give an impression of a participatory democracy.
Like a token effort, token gesture kind of.
Yeah. And it might even be a tactic to dishearten public outcry that doesn't ring true with a numerical majority. However, it does show the way forward for participatory democracy. Firstly, because it relies heavily on social media to focus the crowd, their opinions, and secondly, because it takes politics in the direction of values and issues as opposed to parties and representatives.
Well, even if they haven't made it obligatory, I mean, people might just get the hang of it and enjoy it, and then demand that it is made.
We need to start.
You've got to start somewhere.
To have people think about these things.
Yeah. So, what other examples can you give us?
Well, new forms of democracy are being developed all over the world, and one example is in the city of Porto Alegre in Brazil, where they have allowed for something called participatory budgeting. So that means that a certain amount of the budget is allocated through a collaborative process with its citizens. And each community, they get to discuss the available budget funds, and then they elect a representative that takes their proposal to a citywide assembly.
Yeah. But it sounds like more work. Why not just do it through ordinary party politics?
Well, actually, this is a different kind of beast, and it has several advantages. And first off, it is much more including, and it does not commit its participants to a party program. Secondly, it allows for a broader discussion on what is actually needed than leaving it to politicians who are out to make a name for themselves. And thirdly, it restores trust in the political process. So in Porto Alegre, it has been seen that tax evasion has fallen as a consequence of people understanding and agreeing on how their money is being spent.
I like
Yes,
very
it's
much.
very
If you're agreeing and supporting and even proposing where your money's going to go, you're hardly going to avoid or want to avoid paying it, you know.
Unless you're stingy.
A tight ass.
Yeah.
Yes, we call them. What else do we call them, Mr. Paulie?
A parsimonious person.
That was a bloody big word. That's 5 syllables.
I did a 6-syllable one last week, I think, yeah.
Oh, come on, guys.
Did you have to take a breath? Anyway, participatory budgeting sounds like it could be used for more than just budgeting. Are there examples of this as well?
Yeah, sure. There are many places around the world, as I've said, that are evolving their democracy to include and extend the power of local communities. And a good example here is how Venezuela has constructed its democracy.
Well, hang on. Venezuela. Isn't it a dictatorship with an evil Chavez?
Yeah, and all that communistic stuff that goes on over there as well.
Well, actually...
Sorry, evil communistic stuff.
Actually, Venezuela has a long history of dictators and questionable governing. But from what I can gather, Chavez has been elected under fair conditions 3 times.
And they have a long term there too. They have 6-year
6
terms.
years,
Other than
Yeah, and there's no limit on how many times you can be re-elected.
No, so he could be in there for 18 years if he doesn't.
But to give you an example
Yeah.
of what happened to him was that he was couped in 2002, and through mass demonstrations of popular support, he got reinstalled as the president. And his politics is predominantly leftish and a constant annoyance to private capital forces that want to restore the power that they used to have over the plentiful Venezuelan oil. And I advise our listeners strongly to check independent facts when it concerns Chavez and Venezuela, because main media sources have been really biased on this.
Can
Absolutely.
I just ask, why is there so much poverty then in Venezuela, or is it just the media portraying the country as a poor country due to Hugo Chavez being in control?
No, I think it's a much more complex issue than just when Chavez came to power, that he would just shower the people with money, because that doesn't really help. You need to help people organize themselves and sort of struggle to build stuff. But then you also need to get out the old corruption and the old structures as well.
Yeah, but anyway, thanks for clearing that up about Hugo. But back to democratic reforms, Runa.
Yeah, and actually I was sort of leading into that. And Chavez, he is sort of saying that he's the forefighter for the Bolivarian revolution. But there's another revolution happening inside his country, and it goes by the name of the Quiet Revolution. And it consists of communal councils that take it upon themselves to empower their local community, usually small units, no larger than 150 families, and down to maybe 10 or 15. So in essence, it is a way to bypass large institutions and municipal officials and take governance into their own hands. And the communal council is organized through local initiative and has to go through several steps of census and electoral processes to become a valid part of Venezuelan governance. And what we see is that since 2009, some 30,000 communal councils are officially sanctioned, each of which decide for themselves if they are pro-Chavista or not, if they're paternalistic or horizontal, and so on.
Yeah, it seems to me like it's more like a game-changing evolution of modern democracy, and it fits in well with what we've said in many of our previous programs about local community being the cornerstone of saving society from our crisis. Do you agree here, or do you think there's something more we need to cover as well?
Yeah, I do strongly believe that local community is the way forward for society, and that we need to revive direct people connections in politics. But the question of how we will address larger issues beyond those local communities without the representative democracy, this question still stands unanswered. And currently I can think of only one system that seems viable as the next step, and that is called liquid or delegative democracy.
Liquid, so you get drunk beforehand or something like that?
Well, you could certainly rule that in as an option, by popular voting.
Going back earlier to something you said about doing the booing, and you said booze, I thought you were about to crack open a bottle of scotch there, mate.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
But also, just before the election day here in Norway, of course, the bars are closed. Is that right?
In Norway, bars are closed during the actual... Oh, no,
the
maybe
night
they're
before?
not anymore.
No,
I don't know.
This is older stuff. I
Yeah,
think.
we're going back to the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think maybe Vinmonopol
Closed.
perhaps
Yeah, that's
has
right, yeah.
stricter rules. Or something.
But you mentioned liquid democracy or delegative democracy. Is that in operation anywhere?
It is, but I haven't found a lot of information on it thus far. And I think the most notable examples in use in politics are the Pirate Party in Sweden, Germany, Italy, and Austria. And this party it's brand new and is very special, since it does not bind its member to any political values or issues outside of its core program. So this means that issues not concerning information transparency, freedom of speech, patents, and copyrights are the members' individual responsibility.
The Pirate Party, that's funny, because we were talking about that only a couple of weeks ago, and it's just one thing about party politics which I just don't agree with, because if I was a member of a party and they brought up some kind of issue that I not only didn't like, I was really, really against and even offended by, I would still be I'd be tarred with the same brush, so to speak, and that's what I don't like about party politics. But anyway,
and also a party which is called Pirate. You think that it's obligatory to have a parrot on your shoulder or something like that,
and say R.
R. The R's have it.
Yeah. But anyway, Runa, it's kind of hard to run a political party if you can't reach an inner consensus, isn't it?
Well, that's where liquid democracy comes into play. Any member can raise any issue and thereby start a political discussion to decide what the rest of the party members think about it. Now, this discussion, it keeps going until people feel that the discussion is mature enough to start voting on it. And the voting can be done direct, or it can be delegated to someone you trust. So if you happen to regret your delegation, you can revoke that vote back to your own discretion.
This seems like direct democracy. So what's the big difference there?
The difference is in the delegation part. A delegate is not a representative because a delegate does not have a predefined role. This is left to the discussion and how the voting process turns out. So becoming a delegate doesn't even have to be any more than just being a carrier of votes. Say if you guys gave me your votes, that would make me a delegate with one vote for each of you plus my own. And I could use those votes and cast them directly on a voting option, or I could choose to use those votes and give them to another delegate.
But wouldn't that be really hard to keep track of, all the votes?
Yeah, it would if we were sort of counting by eyes and ears.
Yeah.
But the Pirate Party has developed software for just that, which is called Liquid Feedback. And using the internet to facilitate democracy makes perfect sense for a number of reasons. And I'll name 3 just to be short. Physical attendance is time-consuming and excluding. People can voice their opinions at the same time with easy access to background information. And last, vote counts are immediate and can even be dynamic over time.
Dynamic over time?
Yeah, instead of closing a vote or a poll, the voting stays open regardless of whether the issue has been acted upon or not. So if one wishes, one can set criteria on the number of votes. For example, if the number of votes reaches 80% of the party, the issue will then be added to the core program or something else which you decide.
So seeing how this is just limited to party politics, how do you think this can actually change our democratic systems?
Well, what we are doing today is actually having representatives voted by party who have been voted by us. And this creates a distance between my vote and the policy making, which is completely unacceptable if you consider the ideals of democracy.
How we defined it in the beginning.
Yeah. And if I can be given the choice to participate and vote directly or delegate, that would be much closer to a real democracy.
Rune, this was an interesting explanation, but it's hard to envisage how it would be in real life. So, you know what? To remedy that, we have prepared a short dramatisation of how the future Norwegian democracy quite unthinkably went ahead and tried to legalise marijuana.
Wow. Well, how has it played out?
Okay, Paulie and I pretended to be working in a major news channel, which we called Occupy TV News. And I played the studio news anchor, and Paulie played the on-site reporter. And I really, really hope you and all our listeners enjoyed as much as we enjoyed making it. This is Anthony Cronkite from Occupy TV, and our big story of the day is in Norway, where they've instituted something new called liquid democracy. Our news correspondent Paul Brokaw is on the spot as it all unfolds at the Norwegian Parliament, known as Storting, in Oslo. Paulie, sources say that the first issue to be debated in this new form of parliamentary democracy was the legalisation of marijuana. But can you tell us a bit about how it all worked?
Yes, it's exciting. Hi, Anthony, by the way. It's all very exciting and could prove to be the model for every country in the world.
This is the 8th day of debate of this first and very sensitive issue. They're calling it virtual parliament, Anthony, and the way it works is that the 429 delegates from each Norwegian district have logged on to this parliament over the internet. Now keep in mind, Anthony, each delegate is the main mandate carrier from their district, and they're considered upstanding citizens in their community with an extensive knowledge of the issue at hand. Most of them are doctors, nurses, policemen, lawyers, even some ex-junkies have been present, Anthony.
Very exciting indeed, Paulie. My information tells me that since this is a topic of great concern for many Norwegians, a lot of citizens have logged on as well to follow the discussion online. Is this true?
Absolutely, Anthony. The discussion has raged back and forth, with many important concerns being addressed. At the end of the day, the delegates agreed that there is a great deal of support for legalising, but that it would be pointless to discuss further if less than 10% of the Norwegians actually support it. So then the delegates all cast their votes, comprising 30% of all Norwegians. Excuse me. Those online also start to recast their votes because they have changed their minds during the discussions that took place. The delegates' votes were split 50-50, which meant that 15% of Norwegians now support legalising. There was also this one case of one of the delegates from the northern part of Norway, I believe, experiencing a major drop in votes because of trolling and incoherent rants, and therefore could no longer be considered a viable delegate. He was then replaced with the second highest ranking delegate from that district.
It sounds like a fantastic and new and, dare I say, a real kind of democracy where the voices of the people are not only being heard, but are actually involved in creating law. Apparently the local press have covered the issue extensively and have provided links to the parliamentary discussions and the voting site. Is it true that the voting sites will remain open until the delegates decide to close it?
Yes, that is correct, Anthony. And all the district's virtual assembly sites have been bustling with activity, and several suggestions were forwarded to the delegates. This virtual parliament, as it's called, then decided to vote on the public suggestion to decide if any of them will discuss it further. A lot of day 2 was used on this kind of voting and discussing the relevance of public suggestions and throwing out overlapping points of view.
It all sounds rather time-consuming there, Paulie, but I guess we should take into account that this is a brand new and revolutionary form of democracy and needs to be given some time. What was the outcome on day 2 then, Paulie?
Yes, well, the suggestions that received the most votes were that should marijuana be legalised, then it should be within regulations similar to alcohol consumption, such as to be used in special coffee houses with, for example, a 20-year age limit and restrictions on home growing.
OK, so would you say it's looking promising for the growing number of alternative lifestyle communities that we hear have sprung up around the Norwegian fjords?
Quite possibly, Anthony. The next 3 days were spent discussing what an eventual legislation would look like. The delegates all tried to reach some consensus on how to limit eventual damages while still allowing for example, recreational consumption. At the end of the 5th day, they actually decided on a legislative suggestion that they would want to put to a nationwide vote. But then it came to the weekend and they decided to recess.
Yes, well, we're told that most of the delegates are just normal people with normal jobs, and being a parliamentary delegate is quite a lot of pressure. Is it true that some delegates resigned, and what happens in these cases, Paulie?
Absolutely, Anthony, and in this case, they can just pass on their votes to others who in turn become new delegates.
Well, Paulie, what is the situation now after 8 days of this new liquid democracy at the Norwegian Storting?
Well, after the weekend, the new legislation suggestion had a lot of news coverage. Many people felt that it was too restrictive and that several delegates had been debating far too much on the negative consequences. But after a lot of to and froing, it was decided that the legislation be made law if 60% of the Norwegian population votes yes. If the vote should at any time fall under 55, the legislation would just then be revoked.
OK, so Paulie, what is the upshot? Can you wrap this up for our viewers?
Well, yes, Anthony, I feel personally that this could be the way forward, not only here in Norway, but for all countries that call themselves democracies. It's actually democracy in action. All sub-issues regulating the law are free to be regulated by this liquid democracy on an individual basis. Basically, what happens is that the people get to decide what happens, and no matter what the outcome of this marijuana debate, people here feel as though they actually had a say.
So, what do you think are the chances of this proposed legislation actually making law, Paulie?
Well, the most interesting thing about this is that there's been a huge amount of interest, more than anybody envisaged, and if it doesn't get the required 60% vote, it may just be a matter of time until it does.
Well, thank you very much there, Paulie Brokaw, reporting live from the Norwegian Parliament in Oslo. Now, on to our next story. It seems that the former Prime Minister of Italy, Mr. Silvio Berlusconi, is once again in hot water, as he has been found to be the main financier behind a chain of dubious massage parlours for members of the Italian Parliament and high-profile businessmen.
There you have it. And apart from the fact that it sounded like my head was in the toilet, I think it worked out pretty well.
Mate, I thought you were a great anchor, on-site correspondent.
Well, after that, I think we need a song. And let's have a listen to what Ben Harper would think. It's a song called People Lead.
You're on Student Radio in Bergen, listening to Occupy Radio. Don't forget you can download this on Facebook, Occupy Radio Norway, and on our YouTube channel, Occupy Radio Norway as well. And that was the great Ben Harper. And what was the name of that song, Mr. Paulie?
People Lead.
People Lead. And we've been talking about people and liquid democracy, Runa. Mm-hmm. So do you think that's the end of party politics? How's it going to affect party politics?
I don't think it's going to be end of party politics, but I think party politics needs to evolve and adapt to new systems, which I think there is already debates going on even here in Norway about how they should become new. And I think we need to have these institutions to help people get more interested into the career of doing politics, but that politics should be a common responsibility and not just a getting out of your chair once every fourth or second year.
Yeah, because it seems like it's a kind of a social thing as well for them, isn't it? These parties get together and they booze up and they, all kinds of things like our friend Silvio Berlusconi used to do as well.
Yeah, booze up and get a few chicks.
Yeah. But that pretty much wraps up our show on democracy today, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Mr. Paulie and Runa. Thank you for your impeccable research, as usual.
Thanks.
And is that time for our... Do we have time for our last little segment?
We can sneak in a little...
Science and Tech Breakthrough of the Week.
Science and Tech Breakthrough of the Week, Mr. Paulie. I've got to make this very quick, but it is sweet and lovely as usual. Not as usual, for the first time. And it's about 3D printing. And Vegard, when he used to be in the studio with us, he used to talk about, and he had great faith in 3D printing. And for those people out there who have no idea what 3D printing is, it is exactly what it says. It's printing things, but things that actually exist, not just printing ink. You can build things with 3D printers, and they can be as big as you want them to be. I.e. houses, bikes. And anyway... what has happened here? Science and medical research have colluded here, and a 2-year-old girl who was born with a disease called arthrogryposis, a congenital disease that left her unable to lift her own arms, although she was able to walk, was given a new lease of life by a 3D printed robotic exoskeleton, enabling her to move freely for the very first time. And the exoskeleton was made of a similar material to Lego. And Lego's very light, and it was manufactured using a Stratasys Dimension 3D printer so as to create a prosthetic light enough for young Emma, her name, to continue walking around freely and using her arms. And so, I thought that was a very nice thing to have. But not only that, not only people, but now they've helped animals, because back in 2005, a bald eagle known as Beauty had been shot in the face by a poacher and lost the top part of its beak, and it couldn't eat on its own. And animal rescue workers found her before she starved to death, nursed her back to health via tube feeding, and later hand feeding her with forceps. But it became increasingly obvious that she wasn't going to be able to ever feed herself, and they thought they were maybe going to have to put her down. But suddenly, Jane Fink Cantwell, who apparently dresses like Indiana Jones, refused to take dead bald eagle for an answer, and she joined forces with mechanical engineer Nate Calvin of Kinetic Engineering Group, and together with other scientists, engineers, and even a dentist, they managed to create a nylon polymer beak using a 3D printer. And now Beauty the bald eagle is flying around, feeding herself, drinking and preening herself all on her own.
If she's bald, can they get 3D printers to make some hair for her as well?
Yeah. And that'd be great for you too, mate.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah. We've got to get one.
Nice. I can see 3D printing being used for many, many things in the future, like
yes.
maybe a bit of plastic surgery, a bit of lipo, or adding on things
Length to
maybe appendages.
Yeah, your legs if you're not tall enough to reach things in the cupboard. And
speaking of length, Anthony, we don't have any time left. Unfortunately, it's time to go. You've been listening to Occupy Radio with Anthony Runa. We spoke to Vergard. We've had Aid in the studio, of course, and we've had a great time, haven't we not?
We have. Thank you, listeners, and thank you, boys. And we'll see you next Friday at 12:30.
Bye.
Bye.